Hey, welcome back to Tea and Conversations. Hope everybody's doing well. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I am going to be talking about, first of all, my name is Karen, and I wrote a book and published a year ago called You Are Not Alone, and you can find this on Amazon. It is a book about my journey of healing from childhood abuse. So I will put the link in the description of this video. You can also go to my website, KarenPoirier.com, and you'll find the link there for this. You'll also find the videos that I am creating here, links to those as well. And we just added my other YouTube channel called Karen's Journey, because I have also been on a physical health journey since September of 2021. I have lost 48 pounds. I have gained strength, gained muscle, gotten off all prescription medications. Energy level is fantastic. I can do things now that I was not able to do. So anyway, that's all part of being healthy as a whole person, right? We are emotional, physical, and spiritual beings, and we need to take care of all of those parts. And spiritually, I have been taking care of that part for many, many, many years. The emotional part definitely needed some attention. About 18, 19 years ago, I started that and have been on a journey since then. And the physical journey has been an up and down journey for many, many years, especially after I got pregnant with our first child, and got serious about it last September, because last summer I weighed 230 pounds. I'm 5'6", so that's too much on this body. So I had to make some drastic changes. I talk all about that on my other YouTube channel, and so that is also linked on my website if you want to check that out. Okay, so today, I mentioned in my last video that I would be talking more about things that are happening in the news. I want you to hang with me for a little while longer, because I actually need to go back and address some more things around forgiveness. I told you in my last video that there's a lot to be said on these topics, and topics surrounding healing from abuse, healing from trauma, healing in relationships. I'm hoping to have some people come on and talk about specifically that, because I think that's so beneficial when you talk about healing in relationships with a relationship, and what that looked like for that relationship. I think that'd be very powerful. So I'm planning on that. But for now, I want to talk about something we touched on in the last video, and that is forgiveness and the different aspects of that when it comes to abuse. All right. And the reason why I feel like I still need to talk about this is because I believe there's still too many who knowingly, unknowingly are making themselves, how can I put this? They're thinking they're doing good. Okay, I believe that they, with all their heart, are feel like they're doing the right thing and talking about forgiveness when they talk to, or they realize someone has been abused as a child, and that's the first thing they want to do. I have been talking with pastors. That's something I'm going to eventually talk about too. Recently, I have interviewed, if you will, several pastors on this topic, and they've said, well, my first response, if I ever found out of an abuse situation, is I would make sure both sides have worked through forgiveness. And this is why I need to talk about it. Because I just don't understand that. I don't understand why that would be your first response. and why it wouldn't be a response of, we need to surround the victim with love and support and unwavering attention, meaning that until you know for sure everything, those first few moments, I believe, when you find out someone's been victimized, are crucial in your response. And if your first response is, well, have you forgiven him? That's like, somehow it was your fault. Somehow it was the fault of the victim. And so now the victim has a level of responsibility in this entire thing. Victim has no responsibility in this entire situation. That's why they're called the victim. They were done wrong against. They were perpetrated against. And it needs to be that you come around this person. It's no different than someone who has lost a loved one, right? Someone like a spouse who just lost their spouse. What's your immediate first reaction is empathy. You have empathy for that person, for what they're going through, and you try to come around and support and love and cushion and let them know that you are by their side no matter what. That's what a victim needs. And yet that's not what we get. And again, so this is why I need to talk about forgiveness, because that cannot be the first response. That is not showing empathy to someone who's been victimized and traumatized. We'll get there, okay? That's something you definitely will get to, but it should not be the first response. And it's not up to you to decide when you get to that. That's up to the victim. They need to go through a process. And I understand pastors will hate to hear that because they feel like their first and foremost responsibility is to make sure you have got all your ducks in a row in order to get to heaven. And I get that. But things aren't that black and white, especially when it comes to abuse and trauma. And this is where I feel like we need to do better. So forgiveness. I feel like many feel that, and the reason why they start with forgiveness is because that is somehow a magic switch that's going to make everything else better. So once you get the victim to forgive the perpetrator, then everything else will just fall into place. That is not reality. I talk about it in my book. I can tell you firsthand, that's the route I went, because I had a counselor tell me, my very first counselor tell me, well, have you forgiven your father? That's the first question she asked me. She was a Christian counselor. That was the first question she asked me. And of course, pastors and other church leaders, that would be the first topic that was brought up when I told them I was molested by my father. And so, like a good Christian girl, I thought, maybe I haven't, and that's why I'm still struggling with all of this. Now, this was years later. So I was 10 when it happened. And at this point, I was in my late 20s, I want to say, early 30s, when all of this was playing out. Because I finally come to a place where I need to deal with it. So this is years later. And I'm trying to figure out why I think some of the thoughts I think, why I respond in some of the ways I respond. I was beginning to notice that my responses were extreme, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute too. So I felt like something's wrong, something's off, and I have to figure it out. So I was really aware of something being off emotionally. I just couldn't figure out why. And so those were the first responses I got. Not empathy. It was not, I'm sorry that happened to you, except for my primary doctor. I talked about that in my book, which is what turned me to focusing in on the abuse, because she showed me empathy when I told her what happened to me. Not a Christian. Like I said, it breaks my heart, but it's very rare that Christians know how to respond to abuse victims, and this is what needs to change. We've got to do better. So, and you'll hear me say that a lot. So the forgiveness switch is not reality. That is not going to just fix everything, and then, the process is smooth sailing from there for everybody involved. It just doesn't work that way. Because when I attempted to follow that and be a good girl, good Christian girl, and say, yes, I have forgiven my father. I even went to my father and told him, I've been struggling with this, what you did to me, and how you molested me, and I realize I guess I just haven't forgiven you yet, is why I'm still struggling. So I want you to know I have forgiven you, and yeah, I think that will help our relationship. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then that was it. Come on, people. That is just not it. That doesn't put him in a place where he needs to ask for my forgiveness, and he needs to be accountable, be held accountable for the damage, the immense damage that he caused me. And that's why that doesn't work. It's not a natural progression of dealing with the situation the way it needs to be dealt with, so that there's healing all around. He needs healing too. I get that. For whatever reason he did what he did, he made that choice. I'm not going to make excuses for him, certainly not. That's not my place. He needs to figure that out. But it didn't bring him to that point whatsoever. So we just kept going around that, and the relationship would most definitely take a nosedive. I would emotionally take a nosedive, and it was a vicious cycle. So I mentioned yesterday, forgiveness is a step I have to take in my relationship with God. Okay, so what I was just talking about, that step I took with my father, that's not what was necessary. I needed to take that step with God, sure. And eventually I would have gotten there. The first and foremost thing that needed to happen was for someone to say to me, I'm so sorry that happened. Because you have to understand, when a child is sexually molested, they take that on as it's their fault. They did something to deserve that. Somehow they encouraged that behavior. Somehow they did something that made that other person think it was okay to do this to them. And right? Isn't that so illogical and so bizarre? But that is what happens. And in order to break that, because that's a lie, that is a outright lie, and that's part of the messages of abuse. Abuse lies to its victim. And so that's one of the lies that has to be broken first and foremost. And when somebody looks at you and says, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I am so angry that this happened to you. You did not deserve that. That's powerful. It's powerful. And it starts to break that brick wall of shame that is built when a victim is abused and traumatized. You can believe me or not, it's up to you, but I'm just telling you what it is. This is my experience, and this is what I saw happen, and this is what I went through and realized in order to heal. I had to come to that realization. It was not my fault. I did not do anything to deserve that act that was done against me. Or acts, I should say, because it wasn't just sexual abuse. There was other abuses as well. I didn't do anything to deserve any of it. And that's what I need. That's the message I needed to believe and hold on to. But what I did mention yesterday and just mentioned a minute ago was how that I needed to take that step with God. Forgiving my father, forgiving my parents, forgiving anyone who I feel has offended me and hurt me. First and foremost, that's something I need to work out with God. And I need to make sure that I'm following the Bible and what he says about forgiveness and what I need to do in my heart about it with him. That's it. That's it. That's where it needs to be left. We have to trust people that they're going to work out their own salvation. You can show them, but you cannot hoard it over them, judge them, make sure they're doing the right thing. You do that and you become an unsafe person, and they will turn away from you. You will not be able to help and support someone and show them God's love. You will break that. Just telling you like it is. That's the way it goes. Whether you like it or not, it's the way it is. I talked also about restoration and how that is a series of steps that needs to be taken by both people in a broken relationship. And I said a lot about that yesterday, so I'm not in the last video, so I'm not so sure I'll go into any more about that, but let's just see where this goes. All right, so here's a thought, going back to forgiveness. If forgiveness is, and I say the only step because that's kind of what's been, that's the message I got when in the beginning, and that was the topic everybody brought up there. That was the starting point. So if forgiveness is the only step I need to take in order for the relationship to be magically healed, because that's what I was told. I forgive. If I forgive him, then everything else will fall in place. And I say I add the word magic because that's what it feels like to me. It's like it's the magic switch. Okay? If that's the case, then that places the responsibility of the broken relationship squarely on my shoulders. Would you agree? So it's up to me whether or not that relationship gets fixed. What they're saying is that, in a sense, that's what they're saying. If I choose to do that, if I outwardly do that, I'm not even sure. Then the relationship will be healed, and that puts it all on my shoulders. And that is, I'm not the one who broke the relationship in the beginning, in the first place. Again, this is what I'm saying. Why is responsibility on any level been put on my shoulders for this evil act that was done to me? That's where we have to be asking these hard questions. We need to be looking at this and saying, oh, wait a minute. That's not empathetic. That's not loving. Not at all. So much expectation and responsibility is placed on the victim and not the adult who sexually abused the child. And that needs to change. And I mean, like, total 180 needs to change, and black and white. It needs to be that the victim gets the empathy, the perpetrator gets accountability and the responsibility of the act. That has to be defined black and white in order for this to start changing, I believe. There's just no doubt in my mind. We've been too soft on pedophiles. We've been too soft on perpetrators. And that needs to change. I hope that, I know I probably come across pretty strong about this, but that's because I've been through it. And if you're someone who has been abused, and this is why I am speaking out. It's another reason why I'm speaking out, is because I don't feel like enough of us are speaking out. Not enough of us who have been through it are doing this, are trying to have conversation, are talking about it. I cannot be the only one. There's got to be more of you out there who have been through this and have been through enough of your healing that you're at a point where you could have these conversations. Because it's vital. We have to. If we're just sitting back, so we've gone through the counseling and we found our supportive, empathetic people and the environments to be in and be around, and yet it's still happening all around us. Nothing's really changing. Well, that's a little bit on our shoulders. I believe we can make the change, so that I have to believe that if people who are perpetrators, people who are pedophiles, if they begin to see a shift in how things are being looked at and talked about, then who knows what that will change in their heads and in their minds. I don't know. I don't want to know. I do not want to understand the mind of a pedophile or a perpetrator. I just feel like there has to be some kind of a shift and some kind of a switch, so that victims are taken care of and shown empathy, because it's not happening enough, and it's the damage continues generations after. So we need to change that. So if you are someone who's been abused, I hope that you will join me in talking more about it. Now, if you're someone listening to me right now and you're trying to understand how to support a victim of abuse, please don't ask them if they've forgiven their abuser as part of the first conversation you have with them. In fact, I'm not even sure you should have that in your mind at all as a question. It's just not. And we're going to talk more and more about what the conversation can be like and the things you can focus on. And again, I'm only sharing my personal experience. I'm not a counselor. I am not a licensed therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just sharing with you what helped me to continue to move on in my healing. Because let me tell you, it's not easy. It is not easy. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of frustration. You question everything. It's hard sometimes to find courage and strength, but it's so necessary. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be in a position. Need to put ourselves in a position to help someone find the strength and the courage to heal. I think that's exactly what we're supposed to be working towards. So if you are someone who is trying to understand how to support a victim of abuse, again, like I said, don't ask them if they've forgiven their abuser. That question will it will shut them down, and you will no longer be a safe person. You won't be a person who is considered trustworthy from someone who's been abused and traumatized. I have to go back to something real quick. Last video I mentioned a comment being made to me that all we need is the Bible and Jesus. We don't need counseling. And then I went on to talk about how I needed to process how to heal from abuse, and how to live my life having been abused. And so that I had to find a safe environment and safe people to process that with. I didn't say that the Bible and Jesus are not safe. They are definitely at the center of all of that. However, again, where's our responsibility to come around people who are hurting? If all they need is the Bible and Jesus, they don't need us, then they don't need us. But that's not the truth. And if in saying all we need is the Bible and Jesus, you think that, well, the Bible does include relationships and Jesus talked all about relationships. Yes, he did. But it doesn't give us a line by line example of how to deal with each and every relationship. That just wouldn't be practical, and it would take away from the uniqueness of each and every one of us. So we have guidelines. So in those guidelines is where we need to find balance, and we need to find what is really acceptable to do and what our role is in the relationship, whether it is an abused victim, a perpetrator, or someone who's coming around to support, either one, and what that role should look like. Okay? I've already talked about how forgiveness played out in my healing journey a little bit, talked about how initially, I was told, well, I need to make sure I forgive my father, did that, thought it was going to be that magic switch and we'd have a great relationship after that, but oh no, that did not happen, because I still struggled emotionally. I still struggled with the pain, and there was still so much more for me to face. The damage that was done, I needed to face that. And when I began facing that, my parents both responded horribly. My father became the victim. He said he put himself in the victim mode. This is something I'm doing to him. Because see, when I began to understand healthy relationship, because that's what happens when you start to heal from abuse. You begin to understand healthy relationship, what that looks like. And I realized I have no boundaries with him. There were no boundaries with either one of my parents. And there were very few boundaries in any of my other relationships. So I had that concept was so new to me. And so when I began to implement healthy boundaries, that's when it got really ugly. And my father put himself in the victim mentality. He was now the victim because I set boundaries. And he didn't like them. My mother told me to hear what I've been through and how it's affected me is too hard for her to hear. And she couldn't do it. So, and that's a small snapshot. It would take too much time to share everything, but you can hear more about it in the book for sure. But that's just a little bit to help you understand where it was going. So hopefully you're starting to see that it takes more work than just knowing what the Bible says and knowing what Jesus says and living by that. It takes so much more. It takes that and more. Let's put it that way. So, a little bit more about my healing journey. First and foremost, I had to admit I was angry and understand why. So that's what I kind of just talked about. I had to understand the damage that was done. When someone who has been sexually abused reacts in anger, especially if it seems an extreme response to the situation, it's most likely because of the pain that they are in, and this situation has triggered that pain. And that was me. I was being triggered all over the place. Now, I'm sure you've heard the word trigger. If you've not dealt with trauma in any way or abuse, you might not be able to connect with that word. So I get it. It is hard to articulate and to really help others understand who have not had that experience. So once again, I just ask you, just believe what we say. We're not making this stuff up. If we had the choice, we would not be in this situation. I would not be. This is there's a community of us who have been abused and traumatized. We would not sign up for membership to this community if we had the choice. So that's another level of empathy we need from everyone else, is to realize that this is not by our choice. But here we are. We're stuck with it because of what somebody else did to us. So in order for us to live healthy lives and successful and productive lives, we have to process this stuff. And it is messy. It is not fun. It's hard. But we can't do it by ourselves. We need people to come around us. And again, this is another reason why I'm doing it. It's because I need to inspire all you who have not been through it to be willing to be an encouragement and a support to those of us who have been through this. Secondly, I had to take time figuring out and processing through all the pain of being abused and why that was causing anger, why it was triggering anger. And I had to walk this part of the journey one step at a time. So, I don't know that I've mentioned this word yet, but a big part of this process, big part of this journey is patience. We have to have patience because everybody's journey is going to be different. One of the biggest traps that we as victims fall into is comparing our abuse and our trauma to one another. Well, mine wasn't too bad because it wasn't, didn't go on for 10 years, or I wasn't violently raped, or that's a trap. And we need to be careful and to take care not to continue to buy into that shame message, because that's what that really is. It's part of the shame that comes with being abused and traumatized. Having walked this part of the journey one step at a time, I've discovered that's a majority of where my healing happened. Okay? So, understanding why I was angry wasn't a one-time thing. I would figure it out over here and why I responded to that situation in anger, and then it would happen again over here, and I'd have to figure out why I responded so extremely in that situation, and then it would happen over here, and I have to figure out why I responded so extremely in that situation, and that's how it plays out. It's long, it can be arduous, it can be tiring, and it can be easy to give up because it's hard. But like I said, if we just remember to have patience, because what happens is after every time I figured it out, I got stronger. I healed more and more along the way, figuring out those things. And the more I healed, the stronger I became. And that's huge. The more courage and the more strength I found to keep walking and to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that can be grasped by you guys. All right. Hey guys, I just realized this video is getting very lengthy, so I'm going to go ahead and split it up into part 1 and part 2. So you just watched part 1, and I will get part 2 uploaded as soon as I can finish editing and create another intro video for it. All right? So thanks for hanging with me, and I hope you're enjoying what you're hearing. Let me know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.